The time I went to jail. The reason I'm going to tell this story today is because I was looking back at all the things that I used to do and how far I've come. And I was trying to find things that I should be grateful for. And that was the biggest thing I could think of, really, was looking at who I was before and the things I used to do versus who I am today. This is something that I could never forget because I was an absolute hooligan. I was self-medicating anxiety, depression, had addiction issues. And today I'm going to tell you the story of that time I went to jail. So this is going to be story time with Jared. So rewind the clocks to, let's see, 18 years ago now. And I was going to Almost Heaven, West Virginia, WVU. And for those of you who don't know, that was probably one of the biggest party schools in all of America, really. They would accept anybody and everybody because, especially for the out-of-state kids, they wanted your hefty out-of-state tuition. So they said, you want to come to West Virginia? Come on down, come on down. And I'll tell you, it was the only place I've ever been where you go to a college football game and you're underage and a policeman would hand you a cup and say, drink up, son. And let me tell you, a lot of us mountaineers, we didn't have to be told twice. And that was the culture of WVU. Now, of course, me being me, I'm a little more extreme than most. And on this one particular evening, I think I was 19 years old at this point. 18 or 19, I can't remember. And unfortunately, I spent all of my money on other things. And this guy named Bo, my friends and I, they were all going out. But since I didn't have any money, I didn't go out. And this one guy, Bo, he took pity on me, and he gave me a bottle of Canadian whiskey. And it was not Crown Royal, no, it was some other bottom of the barrel whiskey. And for whatever reason, I decided to start drinking up. And I don't know about you, but when I drink, things can get a little wild, and I find myself in all sorts of adventures, and this adventure was not very fun. And I drink the whiskey, and then, of course, yours truly can't sit still when he's getting all whacked out, and he has to go out and adventure. And I remember venturing to a frat house, stumbling down a high street, is what it was called, where all the frat houses were. And I remember I stumbled, but I kind of did it with a little grace, believe it or not. I stumbled and I found myself right back up. And I got a round of applause from the frat house to my left. And then I wandered all the way back to my dormitory. And then all of a sudden the whiskey turned on me. And I started being an ass. And I would be an ass to everyone I saw. I was an ass to kids. I was an ass to RAs. And I was just ranting and raving. I don't even know about what. And then finally one of the RAs saw a police officer walk by. And he flagged him down and said, we need help with this guy. The guy being me. And the officer came over. And all I had to do was go to my room. That's all the officer asked of me. Just go to your room, son. Just go to your room, son. But I couldn't handle it. I ranted and raved some more, called the cops some names, and then before I knew it, hands behind your back. And my hands were behind my back, and the handcuffs were on. And I do vividly remember this part, right? The whole evening came in flashes, but I remember that. And I remember walking to the police car, and the guy who gave me the bottle and my other friends that were in that house, they saw this, and they acted like they didn't know me. And I went to the cop car. And I probably continued to rant and rave. And I went to the Morgantown, West Virginia equivalent of the holding cell drunk tank at night. But let me tell you, my ranting and raving didn't end there. So I had to do the old strip off all your clothes, bend over, spread them. And I'm going from ranting to screaming to crying to ranting all over the place. I was the full spectrum. And then I had the bright idea to tell all of the people, I'm going to escape from this jail. I'm going to be like Andy Dufresne and tunnel underneath the walls. And for my troubles, the guards were like, "Oh yeah, that's what you're gonna do, huh?" And then they put me in the hole on my first night. And the hole is basically a room with nothing. It's a room with nothing but a drain in the middle. And I was ranting, raving in there too, banging on the walls. I'm going to escape like Andy Dufresne. I'm going to escape like Papillon, or fill in the blank with whatever movie role, prison hero, whatever. And then finally I calmed down. Finally I calmed down. And I went to my cell. They sent me to another cell where all the rest of us poor drunk bastards were. And then there was a guy to my right where I finally got a little bit of sleep, and then there was this female prison guard outside the cell there. And the guy to my right, he was saying something along the lines of, "Oh, can I get out for good behavior?" And the woman told him, the woman guard said, "No, no, no, you're going off the county, boy." And I snickered at him because I'm like, "I'm going off the county. I'm just going to be released in a minute." Not quite. But that guy was telling me the story of what happened to him. He spent $1,200 to get into a jacuzzi with a stripper. And then he got a DUI on the way home. And that was the reason why he was there. So eventually there was a call, and they opened up the cell, and they had us trot out one by one, and they had him go over to this bench, and he kneeled down, and they shackled his legs and handcuffed him again. And I'm like, this bastard, he's going to have to go to jail. And then they call me, and then they do the same thing to me. I'm like, oh no! I thought this was just going to be a holding tank thing where I'm going to be released, and then that's it. But it's like, no. I go into this van, and they kind of send me to a courthouse. And luckily my buddies Matt and Steve, shout out to Matt and Steve. Now they did bust my balls here too, mind you. But I went to this little courthouse, and the judge was like, "You are drunk and disorderly, blah, blah, blah." And they're like, "Yep, we're sending you to county." And I walked back, and my buddy, Matt and Steve, were there, as good buddies do. They were there to make fun of me. And then I was kind of asking the guy who was driving the van, like, how did I wind up here? Because I was coming in and out of consciousness a little bit. And he was just like, and then he proceeded to tell me the story of why they arrested me in the first place. And they said, "The cops told you repeatedly to go to your room. Just go to your room. But the prisoner, you, just couldn't handle it. And you couldn't stop talking. And now you can't stop talking now either." So they sent me back to the holding tank there. And I'm half thinking I'm going to be ROR'd, released on my own reconnaissance. But no, 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 no. They say, "Up, back to the wall here, put your knees on here." And they shackle my legs, and they shackle my hands together, and I go to the county bus van, off to a West Virginia bumble of nowhere jail. And let me tell you, by this time, I'm still a little manic, because this was the grand old time when I didn't really get hungover back then. I got a little heartburn from that whiskey, I remember that, but hangovers weren't much of a thing for me. I was pretty much an alcoholic at that age, and so I was able to handle booze pretty well. And then I remember the 45-minute ride to the county jail. And oh Lord, what a horrific ride that was. And I finally get to the jail, and then we're waiting in this processing room where you have to sit there, and I see a homeless guy, I see all sorts of crazy people. And then they finally send us to where I'm going. And I went to the A block at this county jail. And the A block was for special individuals that were under the influence within 24 hours of their arrest. And they're on withdrawal watch, so to speak. And so they sent me to the block where I'm in the little withdrawal ward. And at this point, I'm actually kind of a little scared and nervous at this point, because the worst part about the jail experience, and now that I'm in county, it's the second day here, the worst part about it is you don't know when you're going to get out. You don't know when the end is in sight. I'm the kind of person where that, if I can see the end, if I know what I have to deal with, I'm okay. But the not knowing part, not knowing when I was going to be able to get the hell out of there, that part was eating me up. And I remember I went to the psychologist, because everyone that gets intaked at the jail there, they have to go to a psychologist. And I vividly remember the guy asking me, "What do you look forward to besides drugs and sex. And at the time, I didn't have an answer. And that was apparently a red flag. And they didn't say anything about it at that point, but they sent me to the cell, back to A Block's cell. And at this point, I still have really bad anxiety at the time. I'm not very assertive, so I'm scared at this point. And then I got a new cellmate. And in the cell here, there's the toilet there, and there's this maybe 2-inch thick mattress with a sorry excuse for a pillow. And my roommate there had gotten his butt whipped by his girlfriend, but since he had whooped her butt twice previously, when the cops were called on this third one, even though she whooped his butt and he had a huge black eye to prove it, they arrested him. And he said, "Yeah, I'm going to probably be in jail here for about 6 months, even though Lily kicked my ass." And I'll always remember, because we were walking down the hall, we're going to our little county jail orientation, him and me, and he sees another guy he knows. West Virginia's a small world after all. And he goes, "Hey buddy, Lily kicked my butt and now I'm here." And he's like, "Oh hell yeah, man." And he was happy as can be and happy-go-lucky and whatever. And it was surprising to me because I was, like I said, I was scared at this point. I was like, I'm out of my element. And then I remember I'm still scared because I don't know when I'm going to be able to leave. And I finally got a phone call, and I was able to call my mother. And oh boy, that wasn't very good either, because my mom was a very sensitive person, and I had to call her. And back in this day and age, you call from the jail, you have to accept the call from the jail. You're getting a call from the county jail in West Virginia. And so my mom accepts the phone call and immediately starts crying. And I'm thinking to myself, as I'm standing in A Block, stop crying, you're going to make a fool of me at the frickin' jail here. And then, so finally she gets in touch with some of my friends, and lo and behold, bail might be on the way soon, but I'm not sure. The bond, whatever it would be at the point. So I go back to the A Block there, and you have to go to the bathroom in front of other people, but all I tried to do was sleep it off. I tried to just sleep. So this is day 2, mind you, and so I have to spend day 2 at the county jail. And then another psychologist comes in and talks to me, and he said, "Well, the other guy that talked to you, he's a little concerned about you. He said you had some suicidal idealizations, etc." And he talked to me, and I told him I was also struggling with Oxycontin at the time. So a couple days before this Canadian whiskey extravaganza, I had done some Oxycontin. And they had given me some blood pressure medicine because apparently my blood pressure was all out of whack. But they said, "Yeah, they're kind of worried about you." And at this point, there was still a lot more ripping and running left in my routine, so I was nowhere near done yet. But there I am in the A Block. The other guy, he's sleeping there too. And I'm still just thinking, when the hell am I going to be able to get out of here? And then finally, second night goes by, and it's the third day. Second night in the county jail. And then they finally call me out to the lobby and say, your bond's been posted, your bail's been posted, some of your friends are on your way. And let me tell you, that was the best moment of my life. It was such a relief to be out of that frickin' West Virginia hole. And I got like a 5 o'clock shadow because I didn't really keep my beard back then. And then I'll remember there was this other woman, younger girl, older than me at the time, but younger to me now. She's probably about 23, 24. And she was a little wild out, and she did a lot of drugs. But I remember thinking, as she offered me a cigarette, because we're both released, and that's what the first thing people did back then. You smoke a cigarette as soon as you get out of jail. And I was listening to her story where she was really into crack, really into methadone. And that was my big thing at first, too. I'm going to tell some stories about methadone coming up here in the future, too. And dope and the other things they used to do. But I remember thinking to myself, I really identify with this girl. Like, we are very similar, her and me. So finally, my friend and a couple of my buddies, they all came to see me and pick me up at the jail because it was, exciting times for them. And I get into the car and like, "Hey, you convict, you." They started making fun of me and busting my balls. But I was just happy to be the hell out of that county jail in West Virginia. And then I called my mother, and I was like just ecstatic to be out of jail. And I called my mom, and she was pissed that I was happy. to be out of jail. And she goes, how dare you be happy after what you just did? I'm like, I'm out of freaking jail. I was in jail for a couple days. I'm going to be happy to be free, aren't I? And so, granted, my relationship with my parents at this point was not very good. I had to sneak, hide, steal, lie, cheat, anything, because they were extremely strict and controlling. And God knows I wasn't going to let them get in the way of my fun. But that was the story of me going to jail. And I had to eventually go to alcohol classes, and I think I even had to do some community service for that extravaganza. But certainly not. It was not the end of my drinking days. But I do remember when I came home for that summer, my mother did tell me, Jared, if we ever smell alcohol in your breath, we're going to take away your keys for the summer. And that was the green light in my head to make a very poor choice and to move from booze on to opiates, because my thinking was they won't be able to smell opiates on my breath. And that's going to be the cliffhanger there for the next tale of the story. And as I tell this story, it hardly even feels like me. It hardly even feels like that was the same person as me. And that whole extravaganza of 2 nights in jail, coming home on the 3rd day, and my buddies making fun of me not being able to close my mouth, and just going to that far off land, relating to the guy that beat his girlfriend and the guy who did the drugs, even though the guy who beat his girlfriend got his butt whipped by his girl. And it was a fiasco, and they were used to it, you know, that was like their routine. But for me, that was still new to me. And I'll never forget that. There's things that are etched on our memories, even though I was drunk off my ass. But I'll never forget that, even though leading up to the actual arrest, I did come in and out of consciousness a little bit. But I do vividly remember getting put in handcuffs, and then my friends ignoring me as I walked to the car, and then me not being able to shut my damn mouth. But that's what happens, kids, when you're a New Jersey boy, and you go to West Virginia, and you're out of your element, and you cause a ruckus, and you don't handle your alcohol as well as you should. Brown liquor, and me to this day, is not very good for me. But I usually just drank beer, and I would never get that out of control. But that whiskey day, oh boy, hell no. I wound up on an adventure I'll never forget. And I'll tell you, it did humble me a little bit after that too. I was a little nervous, because sometimes when I would drink, my friends would tell me what I did the next day, and sometimes they would mess with me a little bit and say I did things I didn't do. But it's not a good feeling being out of control like that and not knowing what you're going to do. Kind of like that song, Sober Pink, whatever it was. But that was the tale of the time I went to jail. Wish I could tell you that's the only time I went to jail, but there might be more stories about that another day. But remember, boys and girls, men and women, these are some of the things that if we have experiences like this, and I know there are plenty of you out there who do, who have been to jail for stretches longer than me by a lot. But those are the times and moments we can reflect on and say, wow, look at where we are today versus where we were then. And there's a lot of things to be grateful for. And it's like that Dumbledore quote, people can find light even in the darkest of places, or happiness even in the darkest of places, if they only remember to turn on the light. And that's how it goes. And so I'm trying to do this gratitude thing, and hey, I'm not above poking fun at myself. I know I was an ass, but it is kind of fun recalling the stories, especially now that I'm out the other side. But at the time, it was a dark time of my life, and my parents were not very happy with me. But that's the story of the time I went to jail. Perhaps you can share this story with others. Normally we talk about radical self-respect here on this channel. Talk about mindset stuff, supplements, dating, relationships, and I enjoy interviewing people as well. With that, thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.